Actually, that scholarship belongs to your sister Madeline. The dean's words cut through my family's celebration like a blade through silk. My mother's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. My father's proud smile cracked and fell. And Jessica, my brilliant, golden sister Jessica, went white as the tablecloth beneath her perfectly manicured fingers. My name is Madeline Chen, I'm 34. And I'm a high school mathematics teacher who just watched her sister's 4-year lie explode at our parents' anniversary dinner. The Riverside Country Club's private dining room suddenly felt smaller, the crystal chandelier too bright, the family portraits on the walls too watchful. Dean Morrison from Pacific University stood beside our table in his navy blazer, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding as he registered the shock rippling through our family gathering. 20 minutes earlier, we'd been toasting Mom and Dad's 35th anniversary. Jessica had been regaling the table with stories about her demanding graduate coursework and how grateful she was for the Morrison Academic Excellence Scholarship that made it all possible. Our parents hung on every word like she was reciting poetry. Our aunt and uncle, visiting from Portland, nodded with appropriate admiration. I'd sat there picking at my Chilean sea bass, watching my sister perform the role of family success story with Academy Award precision. Again. I'm sorry, Dean Morrison continued, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. I thought you knew. Madeline was our recipient for the Morrison Academic Excellence Scholarship. Has been for the past 4 years running, actually. We've been trying to reach her about the renewal paperwork. The foundation wants to feature her community outreach programs in their annual report. I sat frozen, watching my sister's performance fall apart in real time. Jessica had been telling everyone, our parents, our aunts, our family friends, apparently her coworkers, that she'd earned a full ride to Pacific University's graduate program in biomedical engineering. She'd even brought the scholarship letter to show Mom and Dad, laminated and framed like a trophy. The letter with my name on it. The letter I'd never shown anyone because Jessica's acceptance to Stanford's master's program had dominated family conversations that entire month. There must be some mistake, Jessica whispered, but her voice carried none of its usual confidence. She looked at me across the table, and for the first time in years, I saw fear in her eyes. Raw, undisguised panic. Dean Morrison pulled out his phone, scrolling through what I assumed was his contacts. Madeline Chen, mathematics education major, graduated summa cum laude 2019, currently teaching at Lincoln High School. That's you, isn't it? He looked directly at me, his expression warm but professional. I nodded slowly, my throat too tight for words. Around us, the ambient noise of the country club, clinking silverware, murmured conversations, the soft jazz playing overhead, felt suddenly amplified. Outstanding work, by the way. Your thesis on culturally responsive math pedagogy has been cited 17 times in educational journals. The scholarship committee was particularly impressed with your community outreach programs in the immigrant communities. Really innovative work. My mother set down her champagne glass with trembling fingers, the crystal making a sharp sound against the white tablecloth. Madeline, you never mentioned. Because she never told you. The words came out harder than I intended. But 29 years of being overshadowed had crystallized into this moment. Just like she never told you about a lot of things. Jessica's chair scraped against the hardwood as she stood abruptly, her napkin falling to the floor. This is ridiculous. There's obviously been some administrative error. These things happen all the time with university databases. I'll call the registrar tomorrow and sort this out. But Dean Morrison was already shaking his head, his expression shifting to something closer to academic curiosity. Miss Chen, Madeline, submitted her application independently 4 years ago. We have her transcripts, her personal statement, her letters of recommendation from Dr. Martinez and Professor Kim. She interviewed with our board in person. He paused, studying Jessica with the precision of someone accustomed to catching academic dishonesty. I'm curious how you came to believe the scholarship was yours. The silence stretched like a held breath. Our waiter, a young man who'd been hovering hopefully nearby with the dessert menu, quietly retreated to give us privacy. At the next table, another family laughed over their creme brulee, oblivious to the earthquake happening 6 feet away. My father cleared his throat, his lawyer instincts kicking in. Dean Morrison, we certainly appreciate you stopping by, but this seems like a private family matter we should discuss at home. Of course. I only approached because I recognized Madeline from her photo in our alumni newsletter. We featured her after she won the State Teacher of the Year nomination last month. He reached into his jacket and handed me a business card. Madeline, please call my office about the renewal paperwork. The foundation board specifically requested to meet you. My Aunt Linda, who'd been silent since the dean's arrival, finally spoke up. Teacher of the Year nomination? She looked between Jessica and me, her confusion evident. Madeline, you didn't mention that either. It wasn't a big deal, I said quietly, though inside I felt a small flame of pride. The nomination had meant everything to me, validation that my work with struggling students actually mattered. But Jessica's latest drama had overshadowed it completely. Dean Morrison smiled. I disagree. The selection committee called your approach to helping English language learners with advanced mathematics revolutionary. We're hoping other districts will adopt your curriculum model. After he left, the four of us sat in silence that felt dense as fog. The remains of our celebration dinner, Mom's favorite Chilean sea bass, Dad's prime rib, Jessica's barely touched salmon, my own meal growing cold, seemed to mock the festive mood we'd cultivated just minutes before. Madeline, my mother said carefully, her voice carrying a note I'd never heard before, something between guilt and wonder. Why didn't you tell us about any of this? I looked at my sister, who was staring at her hands like they held secrets she'd forgotten how to read. Jessica, who'd been valedictorian to my salutatorian. Jessica, who'd gotten into Stanford while I went to state school. Jessica, who'd always been the daughter who made our parents' eyes light up with pride when she walked into a room. Tell you what? I asked, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. That I applied for a scholarship you didn't know existed? That I earned something on my own merit? That I've been paying for graduate school while you thought I was just, what was it you told Aunt Linda last Christmas? Getting by as a teacher? Jessica flinched like I'd slapped her. Madeline, I never meant, how did you even know about the scholarship? I pressed. I never told anyone I'd applied. I never told anyone I'd won. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Someone at my work mentioned it. They said they'd heard a Chin had won the Morrison Scholarship, and I just assumed. For 4 years? My father's voice carried an edge I rarely heard. Jessica, you've been telling us about this scholarship for 4 years. You framed the award letter. You brought it to Christmas dinner. The weight of it hit me then. For years of watching my sister accept congratulations for my achievement. For years of sitting quietly while she described the demanding academic standards required to maintain the scholarship I'd actually earned. For years of our parents bragging to their friends about Jessica's academic excellence while I graded papers until midnight and tutored struggling students for free. It started as a misunderstanding, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone at work mentioned the scholarship, and when I didn't correct them right away, it just became easier to. I never thought anyone would find out. Easier to what? I pressed. To let Mom brag to her book club about your academic excellence? To let Dad tell his golf partners about his daughter, the scholarship winner? To take credit for 4 years of my work? The words hung between us like a challenge, and I realized I wasn't just angry about the scholarship. I was angry about every time she'd let me fade into the background while she basked in praise that should have been mine. Every family gathering where she'd somehow become the center of attention while I served dessert and cleaned up afterward. Every achievement of mine that got overshadowed by her latest accomplishment, real or imagined. Jessica stood again, this time with more composure, smoothing down her designer dress. I need some air. We watched her walk away, her heels clicking against the hardwood like a countdown timer. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see her silhouette on the terrace, her phone already pressed to her ear. Madeline, my mother said softly, reaching across the table to touch my hand. I'm so sorry. We had no idea. We're so proud of you. But as I sat there looking at my parents' faces, confusion mixed with guilt mixed with something that might have been pride, I realized the scholarship was just the beginning. If Jessica could steal credit for something this significant for 4 entire years, what else had she taken from me? And more importantly, what was I finally going to do about it? The drive home from the country club stretched longer than usual, my parents' Lexus filled with the kind of silence that makes every breath feel deliberate. I stared out the passenger window at the familiar streets of my childhood neighborhood, watching perfect lawns blur past under streetlights, and let my mind drift back to where this all began. I was 8 years old the first time I disappeared in my own family. It was the spring science fair at Westwood Elementary. I'd spent weeks building a volcano that actually worked, not the baking soda kind every kid made, but a real demonstration of geological pressure using a modified pressure cooker my dad had helped me rig. The thing was magnificent, perfectly scaled, with genuine pumice I'd ordered online with my allowance money, and an eruption that shot colored water 15 feet into the air. Jessica was 6 then, still young enough that the science fair wasn't mandatory for her grade. But she'd tagged along anyway, wearing her favorite purple dress with the sparkly butterfly on the front. She spent the entire evening charming the judges, asking them about their jobs, complimenting their ties, making them laugh with her precocious observations about Madeline's smart volcano. I won first place. I should remember that moment, standing behind my project, holding the blue ribbon, explaining to Mrs. Peterson how I'd calculated the pressure ratios. Instead, what I remember is watching my parents pose for pictures with Jessica beside my volcano, her small hand resting on the base like she'd helped build it. "Madeline, get in the picture," Mom had called, but by then they'd already taken a dozen shots. I was the afterthought, squeezed into the frame beside my own project while Jessica beamed at the center of the group. That became the pattern. My achievements turned into Jessica's photo opportunities. "Madeline, do you remember your science fair volcano?" Mom asked softly from the front seat, as if she'd been reading my thoughts. The question caught me off guard. She so rarely brought up my childhood accomplishments. "Of course," I said. "You were so proud that night." "We all were." She paused, adjusting the rearview mirror to look at me. "I just realized, we never hung up your ribbon. It's still in the kitchen drawer somewhere." Meanwhile, Jessica's kindergarten participation certificate for the school reading program hung framed in the hallway for 12 years. The car pulled into our parents' driveway, and through muscle memory I followed them inside the house where I'd grown up. Nothing had changed much, the same beige walls, the same family photos clustered on the mantel, the same worn spots on the hardwood where Jessica and I used to practice ballet routines. I walked over to the mantel while my parents went to the kitchen, studying the photographic evidence of our childhood. Jessica's high school graduation, front and center in an ornate silver frame. Jessica's Stanford acceptance letter, matted and framed beside it. Jessica's first job promotion, celebrated with a family dinner that merited its own photo series. My college graduation picture sat in a simple black frame, tucked behind Dad's reading glasses case. "Madeline, honey, come sit down." Mom's voice carried from the living room. She'd changed out of her dinner dress into her usual evening uniform of yoga pants and one of Dad's old Princeton sweatshirts. Dad had loosened his tie and poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon, his ritual after any family event that required dress clothes. I settled into the leather armchair that had been mine since childhood, the one position slightly outside the conversation circle formed by the couch and Dad's recliner. Even the furniture arrangement reflected our family dynamics. "Help us understand what happened tonight," Dad said, his voice gentle but carrying the precision he used with difficult clients. "How long have you had this scholarship?" "4 years. Since I started graduate school at Pacific." The words felt strange to say aloud. I'd been holding this secret for so long that sharing it felt like revealing a superpower I'd forgotten I possessed. "But you never mentioned it," Mom said, settling beside Dad on the couch. "Not once." I thought about how to explain without sounding petulant, without reducing myself to the whining little sister I'd worked so hard to outgrow. "Remember when I got into the master's program? I called to tell you, and you put me on speakerphone while you were making dinner." I started to mention the scholarship, and Jessica walked in talking about getting promoted to senior lab tech at Biogen. The conversation shifted to her news, and by the time we hung up, I'd never gotten to finish. The memory crystallized as I spoke it aloud. I'd stood in my apartment kitchen, holding the scholarship notification letter, listening to my family celebrate Jessica's promotion over the phone. When Dad asked if I had anything else to share, Jessica had started describing her new responsibilities and higher salary, and somehow 20 minutes passed without me finding another opening to speak. "You should have called back," Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I tried. The next week when I called, you were busy planning Jessica's promotion celebration dinner. The week after that, she'd started dating Marcus and you wanted to hear all about him. Then it was Thanksgiving, and she announced they were getting serious, and Christmas was all about whether he'd propose." I trailed off, realizing how pathetic it sounded when laid out chronologically. But it was true. Every conversation for 4 years had been dominated by Jessica's latest development. Her career advancement, her relationship milestones, her apartment hunting, her travel plans. I'd learned to time my calls strategically, to find the brief windows when her drama wasn't consuming all available family attention. "We should have noticed," Dad said quietly. "We should have asked." "Asked what?" I was doing exactly what everyone expected, teaching high school, living quietly, not making waves. Jessica was the one with the exciting life. The bourbon glass sat forgotten in Dad's hand. Madeline, we've never thought of your life as less important, but that wasn't true, and we all knew it. Jessica's victories were family celebrations. Mine were private satisfactions. Jessica's problems required emergency family meetings. Mine were solved independently, without bothering anyone. Do you remember when I won the teaching award last year? I asked. The regional recognition for innovative curriculum design? Mom's face went blank for a moment, then flushed with obvious guilt. Of course we remember. You remembered because I mentioned it again tonight. But when it happened, when I called to tell you, Jessica had just gotten engaged. The call turned into wedding planning, and I never got past saying I'd received some recognition at work. The silence stretched between us, thick with accumulated years of misunderstanding. Outside, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking and the distant hum of traffic on the main road. Normal sounds from a normal evening in a normal family that was anything but normal. She took your scholarship letter, Dad said suddenly. From your mail. That's the only way she could have gotten it. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I wondered why I never got the official notification. The dean mentioned they'd been trying to contact me about renewals, but I only ever heard from them through my student portal. I pulled out my phone, scrolling back through years of emails. Look, all my correspondence with them has been digital. I assumed they'd gone paperless, but Jessica had been bringing physical letters to family dinners for 4 years. Letters with my name on them. Letters she'd somehow intercepted and claimed as her own. That's mail fraud, Dad said, his legal training kicking in. Federal crime. I'm not reporting my sister for mail fraud, I said quickly, though the word sister felt strange in my mouth after everything that had happened. Mom was crying now, quiet tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand. Madeline, I am so sorry. We failed you. We've been failing you for years. I wanted to comfort her, to say it wasn't that bad, to minimize the damage like I always did. But sitting in that familiar living room, surrounded by evidence of my systematic erasure from my own family's narrative, I couldn't summon the energy to protect anyone else's feelings. I need to know, I said finally. Is this the only thing she's taken credit for? Because if she could do this for 4 years, if she could steal my mail and lie to your faces and let me sit here watching you praise her for my accomplishments, what else has she done? Neither of them answered, but I saw something pass between them, a look that suggested they'd begun wondering the same thing. My phone buzzed with a text message. Jessica, we need to talk. Just us. Tomorrow. I showed the screen to my parents. She wants to explain. What are you going to do? Dad asked. I thought about the scholarship letter sitting in Jessica's apartment, probably mounted in an expensive frame. I thought about 4 years of stolen credit, stolen pride, stolen recognition. I thought about Dean Morrison's surprise at my family's ignorance of my achievements, and how small that had made me feel. I'm going to listen, I said finally. And then I'm going to decide what comes next. Jessica chose Café Luna for our meeting, the same place where she'd celebrated her fake graduation 4 years ago. I arrived early, ordering black coffee and claiming the corner table where we used to study together in college, where I'd helped her through organic chemistry while she'd complained about how much easier my education coursework was. The irony wasn't lost on me. She walked in 20 minutes late, wearing the kind of effortless elegance that had always made me feel underdressed. Cream cashmere sweater, designer jeans that probably cost more than my monthly groceries, hair perfectly blown out despite the December wind. She looked like someone who'd never had a day of consequences in her life. Madeline. She slid into the chair across from me, not bothering to remove her coat. Thank you for coming. I waited while she ordered a lavender oat milk latte with an extra shot and 2 pumps of vanilla syrup. Even her coffee order was complicated. So, I said when the barista left. 4 years. She flinched like I'd thrown ice water on her. I know how it looks, do you? I kept my voice level, conversational, professional. Because I'm trying to understand how it looks from your perspective. Help me see it. This was me trying to be fair, trying to give her space to explain, to maybe find some version of events that didn't make her a complete fraud. Some part of me still wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation, that my sister wasn't capable of sustained, calculated deception. Jessica wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like it was an anchor. It started innocently. Marcus introduced me to his colleague Dr. Peterson at a work party. Dr. Peterson mentioned that a Chin had won the Morrison Scholarship, and when he started congratulating me, I just didn't correct him. Why not? Because Marcus had been talking about how accomplished his girlfriend was, and I'd been feeling insecure about my job. You know how competitive biotech is. Everyone has advanced degrees and prestigious fellowships. I was just a lab tech. I studied her face, looking for signs of genuine remorse. Instead, I saw the same calculated vulnerability she'd perfected as a child when she'd broken something and needed to charm her way out of trouble. So you let Dr. Peterson believe you'd earned my scholarship, I said. What about the rest of it? The 4 years of family dinners where you described the academic rigor and the research requirements and the renewal process? She looked down at her hands. Once I'd told Marcus's colleague, I had to maintain the story. And then Marcus started telling his friends, and it felt easier to just go with it. Easier than what? Telling the truth? Madeline, you don't understand the pressure I'm under. Marcus works with Nobel Prize winners. His ex-girlfriend had a PhD from MIT. I needed something that made me sound accomplished. The admission hung between us like a confession, but not the kind I'd expected. She wasn't apologizing for stealing my achievement. She was explaining why she'd needed to. What about Mom and Dad? I asked. They weren't pressuring you to be more accomplished. They were already proud of you. Jessica's laugh was bitter. Were they? Really? Because from where I sat, I was the daughter who peaked in high school. You had your teaching career, your graduate program, your noble calling helping underprivileged kids. I was stuck in a lab running other people's experiments. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. So you took mine. I borrowed your success, she corrected. It's not like you were using it. The words hit me like a physical blow. Using it? You never told anyone about the scholarship. You never brought it up at family dinners or posted about it on social media. It was just sitting there, wasted on someone who didn't even want credit for it. I stared at her across the small table, trying to process what I was hearing. You think I didn't want credit for earning a prestigious academic scholarship? Did you? She challenged. Because your behavior suggested otherwise. You're the one who keeps your achievements secret. You're the one who never asks for attention or recognition. I just used what you weren't using. This was the sister I'd grown up with, the one who'd convinced our parents that my missing Halloween candy had somehow migrated to her room on its own. The one who'd borrowed my clothes without asking and returned them damaged, then acted like I was unreasonable for being upset. She wasn't apologizing. She was justifying. The scholarship letter, I said. The physical one you showed Mom and Dad. Where did you get it? For the first time, she looked genuinely uncomfortable. It came to your old address, the apartment you lived in during senior year. The landlord forwarded it to Mom and Dad's house by mistake. And you intercepted it. I was visiting when it arrived. Mom handed it to me thinking it was mine because it said Chin on the envelope. And you didn't correct her. Not immediately, no. I waited for more explanation, but that was apparently all she planned to offer. The casual admission that she'd stolen my mail let our parents believe it was hers, and built 4 years of family mythology around it. Jessica, do you understand what you've done? I asked, not just to me, but to Mom and Dad. They've been bragging about your scholarship for 4 years, to their friends, to Aunt Linda, to Dad's golf partners. What happens when they have to explain that it was all a lie? She shifted in her chair, finally showing a flicker of awareness. We don't have to tell them. What? The dean already told them it was yours. We can just say there was confusion about the paperwork, that we were both recipients or something. Let it die down naturally. I felt my composure crack for the first time. Let it die down naturally? Jessica, this isn't a misunderstood restaurant bill. You stole my identity. You've been living off my achievements while I sat at family dinners watching Mom and Dad praise you for work I did. Keep your voice down, she hissed, glancing around the cafe. Why? Afraid someone will overhear? Afraid your carefully constructed image might get damaged? This isn't just about me, she said, leaning forward. Think about Marcus. Think about my job. People know about the scholarship now. If word gets out that I lied. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're worried about your reputation? I'm worried about my life, Madeline. My career, my relationship, my future. You can't just destroy all of that over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I repeated the words slowly, tasting their absurdity. Is that what we're calling fraud now? Jessica's mask slipped completely then, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. What do you want from me? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I borrowed your unused scholarship credentials to advance my life. I'm sorry you're upset about recognition you never even wanted. What else do you need to hear? The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. This wasn't remorse or even embarrassment. This was annoyance that she'd been caught. She was treating my pain like an inconvenience, my stolen achievement like a borrowed sweater. I want you to understand what you've cost me, I said quietly. For years of wondering why my family never seemed impressed by my work. For years of feeling invisible while you basked in applause that belonged to me. For years of thinking I wasn't good enough to earn my parents' pride. That's not my fault, she snapped. If you'd wanted recognition, you should have spoken up. You should have demanded it. That's how the world works, Madeline. Nobody gets credit for being quietly competent. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped against the tile floor. Several other customers looked over, but I no longer cared about making a scene. You're right, I said, pulling on my coat. Nobody gets credit for being quietly competent. But they also shouldn't have their credit stolen by someone who was loudly incompetent. Jessica's face flushed. Madeline, sit down. We're not done talking. Yes, we are. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. I came here hoping you'd show some remorse, maybe offer to make things right. Instead, you've made it clear that you don't think you've done anything wrong. Where are you going? She called after me. I paused at the door, looking back at my sister sitting alone at the table with her expensive coffee and her borrowed accomplishments. I'm going to figure out what else you've stolen from me. And then I'm going to get it back. I drove straight home from the cafe, my hands shaking with a combination of rage and clarity I'd never experienced before. Jessica's words echoed in my head. Nobody gets credit for being quietly competent. As if my restraint had been weakness instead of grace. As if my sister's theft was somehow my fault for not guarding my achievements closely enough. My apartment felt smaller when I walked in. The stack of ungraded calculus tests on my kitchen table a reminder of my actual life versus the fantasy version Jessica had been living. I made chamomile tea and sat down at my laptop, determined to understand the full scope of what had been taken from me. I started with the Morrison Scholarship website, methodically reading through every page I'd never bothered to explore. The alumni section made my breath catch. There I was, featured in their spring newsletter as Scholarship Recipient Spotlight. A full article about my work with immigrant students, my innovative curriculum development, my plans to open a community math center. All achievements I'd never shared with my family because Jessica's engagement drama had dominated every conversation for months. The article was dated 6 months ago. My parents had never mentioned seeing it, which meant they weren't following the foundation's updates. But someone else might be. I opened Facebook and searched for Jessica's profile. Her privacy settings had always been loose, and I scrolled through months of posts until I found what I was looking for. 3 weeks ago, she'd shared a link to the Morrison Foundation's general webpage with the caption, "So proud to be part of this amazing organization. #grateful, #scholarship, #blessed." 17 likes, 12 comments congratulating her on her continued success, including one from Marcus. My brilliant girlfriend continues to amaze me. The casual audacity of it made me dizzy. She wasn't just stealing credit passively anymore. She was actively promoting the lie, using social media to spread her false narrative to a wider audience. People who might Google her name and find my articles, my interviews, my actual work. I opened a new browser tab and searched Jessica Chin Morrison Scholarship. The results were a mixture of my legitimate achievements and her social media posts claiming them. To an outside observer, it would look like either a remarkable coincidence or deliberate identity confusion. Then I found something that stopped me cold. A LinkedIn post from 6 months ago, right around the time the newsletter article was published. Jessica had shared an article about innovative teaching methods in STEM education, an article that quoted me extensively about my work with English language learners. She'd posted it with the comment, sharing some insights from my recent interview about culturally responsive mathematics education. Always learning and growing. She'd made it sound like she was the one being interviewed, like she was the expert being quoted. And in the comments, her professional network had responded accordingly. "Jessica, I had no idea you were involved in education policy. Brilliant work. Would love to chat about implementing some of these ideas in our district. Your expertise in both biotech and education is impressive." I screenshot the post, my hands trembling. This wasn't passive identity theft anymore. This was active appropriation of my professional reputation. She was positioning herself as an expert in my field, using my work to enhance her own credibility. My phone rang. Mom. Madeline, honey, I've been thinking about our conversation last night. Your father and I want to make this right. How? I asked, still staring at Jessica's LinkedIn post. We want to celebrate you properly. Maybe have a family dinner to honor your scholarship, invite some relatives, show you how proud we are. The offer should have made me happy, but all I could think about was Jessica's social media web of lies, the colleagues who thought she was an education expert, the professional opportunities she might have gained using my reputation. Mom, I need to ask you something. Has Jessica ever mentioned being interviewed about education policy? Or consulted on curriculum development? Silence. Then, actually, yes. She mentioned something a few months ago about a consulting opportunity. Some district in Oregon wanted her input on mathematics education for immigrant students. We thought it was strange since her background is biotech, but she said they were looking for someone with diverse experience. The blood drained from my face. She took a consulting job. Using my expertise. What do you mean? The interview she mentioned, the expertise she claimed, it was all based on my work. My research, my publications, my actual experience. She's been using my professional identity to get paid consulting work. I could hear Mom's sharp intake of breath. Madeline, are you sure? I was already pulling up the Oregon Department of Education website, searching their consultant listings. There it was, Jessica Chen, listed as a specialist in culturally responsive STEM education for English language learners. The bio described her as an award-winning educator whose innovative approaches to mathematics instruction have been featured in national publications. Every word of that bio described me. My work, my awards, my publications. But it was attached to her name. I'm looking at the state education website right now, I told Mom. She's listed as a consultant. They're paying her to train teachers in methods I developed. Oh my God. Madeline, this is more than just a misunderstanding about the scholarship. This is fraud, I said quietly. Professional fraud. She's taking money for expertise she doesn't have, based on work she didn't do. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen as the afternoon light faded, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd discovered. The scholarship theft had been shocking enough, but this was systematic identity appropriation. Jessica hadn't just stolen one achievement, she'd stolen my entire professional reputation and was monetizing it. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. I've been thinking about our conversation. Maybe we can find a compromise. Call me. Instead of calling, I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. Screenshots of her social media posts, the consulting website, the LinkedIn comments from her professional network. I saved copies of my own publications, my university transcripts, my employment records at Lincoln High School. Evidence that the work she was claiming was definitively, provably mine. Then I found the email. It was buried in my spam folder from 3 months ago, from the Oregon Department of Education. Follow-up on Jessica Chen consultation inquiry. The body of the email referenced my innovative curriculum work and asked if I was available for a training contract. They'd sent it to my personal email, probably found through my university publications, but addressed it to Jessica. Someone had given them the wrong contact information, or the right contact information with the wrong name. I called the number listed in the email signature. A woman named Dr. Martinez answered. Hello, I'm calling about the mathematics education consultation you requested with Jessica Chen. Oh yes, we've been so impressed with her work. The training she provided last month was exactly what our teachers needed. Are you following up on the additional session she proposed? My world tilted. She already did the training? Absolutely. 3 full days working with our high school mathematics departments. The teachers are already seeing improvements in their English language learners' performance. Jessica's approach to breaking down language barriers in complex mathematical concepts was revolutionary. Revolutionary. The same word Dean Morrison had used to describe my thesis work. Dr. Martinez, I need to clarify something. Are you absolutely certain the consultant's name was Jessica Chen? Of course. I have her contract right here. Jessica Chen, specialist in culturally responsive STEM education. Why do you ask? I took a deep breath. Because Jessica Chen is my sister. And the methods she taught your teachers are based on research I conducted, curriculum I developed, and techniques I've been using in my classroom for 5 years. She's never taught a day in her life. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Are you saying, Dr. Martinez said carefully, that Jessica Chen misrepresented her qualifications? I'm saying Jessica Chin committed educational fraud. She took payment for expertise she doesn't possess, using methods developed by someone else. And if your teachers are implementing techniques they learned from someone who doesn't actually understand them, your students could suffer. After I hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, surrounded by evidence of my sister's betrayal. The scholarship was just the beginning. She'd been systematically stealing my professional identity, using my hard-earned expertise to advance her own career and reputation. How many other consulting jobs had she taken? How many professionals in my field thought Jessica Chin was the innovative educator, while I remained invisible in my high school classroom? My phone rang again. Jessica. Madeline, we need to talk right now. It's urgent. Is it about the Oregon consulting contract? I asked, because I just spoke with Dr. Martinez. The long pause told me everything I needed to know. You called them? Her voice was sharp with panic. Madeline, you have no idea what you've just done. What I've done. Jessica, you committed educational fraud. You took money for expertise you don't have. You're going to ruin everything, she hissed. My reputation, my relationship, my career. Is that what you want? To destroy your own sister over some stupid misunderstanding? I looked around my small apartment, at the life I'd built through my own genuine effort, the students I'd helped through my own real expertise, the recognition I'd earned through my own authentic work. No, Jessica, I said calmly. I want to stop you from stealing any more of my life. And for the first time in 29 years, I hung up on her first. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, building what my father would have called a case file. 3 columns, what she stole, when she stole it, who knows about it. By sunrise, I had filled 7 pages with documented evidence of Jessica's systematic theft of my identity. The scholarship was just the foundation. Built on top of it was a complex architecture of lies, the consulting contracts, the social media expertise, the professional network that believed Jessica Chen was an innovative educator. She'd turned my life's work into her personal brand. But as I traced the timeline of her deceptions, I noticed something interesting. Every theft had been reactive, opportunistic. She'd taken the scholarship because the letter arrived at the wrong address. She'd claimed my research because someone congratulated her by mistake. She'd pursued consulting work because my reputation had opened doors she couldn't access on her own. Jessica wasn't a master manipulator. She was a parasite, feeding off opportunities my actual achievements had created. My phone had been buzzing with increasingly frantic texts since midnight. Madeline, please call me. We can work this out. You're overreacting. Think about the family. I'll fix the Oregon situation. Just don't do anything else. Mom is crying. Dad won't speak to me. Are you happy now? That last one made me pause. Not because I felt guilty, but because it revealed something crucial about Jessica's psychology. Even now, caught red-handed in multiple frauds, she was trying to make me the villain. The sister who'd exposed lies was somehow worse than the sister who'd told them. I made coffee and opened my laptop, settling in for serious research. If Jessica could steal my professional identity, I needed to understand exactly how far the damage extended. First, I searched academic databases for citations of my work. My thesis on culturally responsive mathematics had been referenced in 17 peer-reviewed papers, just as Dean Morrison had mentioned. But 3 of those papers incorrectly attributed quotes to Jessica Chen instead of Madeline Chen. Simple transcription errors that Jessica had probably never corrected, maybe even encouraged. Then I found the newspaper article. It was from the Portland Tribune, dated 8 months ago. Local biotech worker pioneers educational innovation. The piece featured Jessica discussing her groundbreaking work bridging STEM education and immigrant communities. She was quoted extensively, describing techniques I'd developed, philosophies I'd articulated, even specific lesson plans I'd created. The article included a photo of Jessica standing in front of a whiteboard covered in mathematical equations. Equations I recognized because I'd used them in my Teacher of the Year application portfolio. At the bottom of the article, a small bio. Jessica Chin holds a Morrison Academic Excellence Scholarship and has been featured in Pacific University's alumni publications for her innovative educational research. She wasn't just stealing my work anymore. She was using my credentials to position herself as the authority on my own methods. And people were listening. The article had been shared hundreds of times on social media, mostly by educators praising her fresh perspective on mathematical instruction. I screenshot everything, adding it to my growing evidence file. Then I did something I'd never done before. I created a Google alert for Jessica Chen Education to monitor how she might be using my identity going forward. My phone rang. Unknown number. Is this Madeline Chen? A man's voice, professional but warm. Yes, who's this? Dr. James Kim from UC Berkeley School of Education. I got your number from Dean Morrison at Pacific University. I hope you don't mind the cold call, but I'm putting together a conference panel on culturally responsive STEM education, and your work keeps coming up in my research. I felt a small flutter of pride, quickly followed by wariness. What specifically have you heard about my work? Well, I've been following the research attributed to Jessica Chen. I assume you're related, and I'm fascinated by the longitudinal data on English language learners' mathematical achievement. The Portland Tribune article mentioned some remarkable success stories. My stomach dropped. Dr. Kim, I need to clarify something important. Jessica Chen is my sister, but she's not an educator. The research you're referring to is mine. A long pause. I'm sorry, I don't understand. The article clearly identified Jessica as the researcher behind these methods. The article was incorrect. Jessica works in biotechnology. She has no background in education, no teaching experience, and no involvement in the research you're describing. But she's listed as a consultant with Oregon's Department of Education. She presented at their statewide conference last month. While I was grading papers and tutoring struggling students after school, Jessica was giving keynote presentations about my work to hundreds of teachers. Dr. Kim, would you be willing to send me the conference program? I think there's been a significant misunderstanding about who developed these educational methods. After we hung up, I sat staring at my laptop screen, feeling something shift inside me. For 29 years, I'd been the accommodating sister, the one who smoothed over conflicts and avoided confrontation. I'd let Jessica shine while I stayed in the background, convincing myself that recognition didn't matter as long as the work got done. But this wasn't about recognition anymore. This was about professional integrity, about the students whose education was being impacted by someone pretending to have expertise she didn't possess. This was about the educators who thought they were learning from Jessica Chen, not knowing they were actually learning from Madeline Chen. I opened a new document and started typing. To whom it may concern, I am writing to formally notify you that my professional identity has been misappropriated by Jessica Chen, who has been presenting herself as the author of my educational research and methodology. I drafted letters to every organization I could find that had featured or hired Jessica based on my work. The Oregon Department of Education, the Portland Tribune, UC Berkeley's conference committee, the consulting companies that had contracted with her. Each letter was professional, factual, and backed by documentation proving that the work attributed to Jessica Chen had actually been conducted by Madeline Chen. Then I did something that scared and thrilled me in equal measure. I created my own professional website. For hours, I uploaded my real credentials, my actual research, my genuine testimonials from students and colleagues. I included photos from my classroom, videos of my teaching methods in action, peer-reviewed publications with my name clearly visible. I built a comprehensive digital presence that would appear whenever someone searched for Madeline Chen Education or culturally responsive mathematics. But most importantly, I included a prominent section called Frequently Asked Questions with this entry. Question: Are you related to Jessica Chen, who has been featured in education publications and conferences? A. Jessica Chen is my sister, but she is not an educator and has no background in educational research or methodology. Any work attributed to her in the field of mathematics education, particularly regarding English language learners and culturally responsive teaching, is based on research and methods I developed. I am the Madeline Chen referenced in academic publications and the recipient of the Morrison Academic Excellence Scholarship. I published the website at 3 a.m., then immediately shared it on every professional platform I could find: LinkedIn, Twitter, ResearchGate, my university's alumni network. I tagged every colleague who'd ever cited my work, every administrator who'd ever praised my methods. Within an hour, the responses started coming in. Madeline, I had no idea you had a sister also working in education. The Portland article made it sound like Jessica developed these techniques independently. This is concerning. Our district hired Jessica Chen as a consultant based on her supposed expertise. Can you clarify the relationship between your work and hers? I'm confused. Are there two education researchers named Chen working on similar projects? I replied to each message with the same calm, professional response: there is only one researcher. The work attributed to my sister is actually mine. I have documentation proving this, which I'm happy to share. My phone started ringing. Colleagues, administrators, journalists who'd covered Jessica's fake expertise. Each conversation was the same: shock, confusion, requests for proof that I readily provided. By dawn, I had forwarded 17 formal complaints to various organizations, created an indelible digital record of my actual accomplishments, and set in motion a chain of verification that would soon reach everyone in Jessica's professional network. I also had 37 missed calls from Jessica. As the sun came up, painting my small apartment in warm golden light, I made breakfast and sat down to check my emails one final time. At the top of my inbox was a message from Dr. Martinez at the Oregon Department of Education. Ms. Chen, thank you for bringing this situation to our attention. We take professional misrepresentation very seriously. We'll be conducting a full investigation into the consulting contracts issued to Jessica Chen and will be pursuing appropriate legal remedies. We would very much like to discuss hiring you, the actual expert, for future educational consultations. I closed my laptop and looked around my apartment, seeing it differently now. Not as the small space where the unrecognized sister lived quietly, but as the headquarters where Madeline Chen, the real Madeline Chen, had finally decided to reclaim her life. My phone buzzed with another text from Jessica. Madeline, what have you done? My entire career is falling apart. Please call me. I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. For the first time in my life, Jessica's crisis wasn't going to become my emergency to solve. Jessica showed up at my apartment at 7 a.m., still wearing yesterday's clothes and the kind of desperate expression I'd only seen once before, when she'd crashed Dad's car senior year and needed me to help cover for her. She let herself in with the key I'd never bothered to take back, a presumption that would have bothered me yesterday but now felt fitting. One last violation to add to the list. Madeline, we need to talk. Her voice was raw, like she'd been crying or screaming or both. You've destroyed everything. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open, still in my pajamas, surrounded by printed emails and legal documents. I'd been up for 4 hours, responding to inquiries from journalists, educators, and administrators who'd discovered the truth about Jessica's fraudulent expertise. Good morning to you too, I said, not looking up from my screen. Coffee's fresh if you want some. Don't. Her voice cracked. Don't pretend this is a normal sister chat. Do you have any idea what you've done? I closed my laptop and really looked at her for the first time. Jessica's perfect composure had completely shattered. Her hair was unwashed, her designer clothes wrinkled, her manicured nails bitten down to the quick. She looked like someone whose carefully constructed world had collapsed in a single night. Which, I realized with satisfaction, was exactly what had happened. I do know what I've done, I said calmly. I told the truth. I reclaimed my professional identity. I prevented you from continuing to commit fraud using my credentials. It's not that simple. She slammed her hand on the table, making my coffee cup jump. Marcus broke up with me. My consulting contracts have been canceled. Oregon is threatening legal action. The Tribune is printing a retraction. My boss wants to meet with me this morning to discuss my misrepresentation of qualifications on my job application. I absorbed this information with what surprised me: complete emotional neutrality. A year ago, Jessica's pain would have activated every protective instinct I possessed. I would have dropped everything to help her fix whatever crisis had befallen her. Now I felt like I was listening to consequences finally catching up with choices. I'm sorry you're facing consequences, I said. But they're consequences for things you actually did. Things I did. Jessica's voice rose to near hysteria. Madeline, I never meant for it to go this far. It was just a misunderstanding that got out of control. I reached for the manila folder I'd prepared and pulled out printed screenshots of her social media posts, the Portland Tribune article, the Oregon Department of Education consulting contract, the UC Berkeley conference program that listed her as a keynote speaker on my innovative mathematical pedagogy. Which part was a misunderstanding? I asked, spreading the documents across the table like playing cards. This LinkedIn post where you shared my research and claimed it was insights from your recent interview? Or this newspaper article where you described, in detail, lesson plans I created? Or maybe this consulting contract where you were paid $12,000 to train teachers in methods you've never actually used? Jessica stared at the papers like they might burst into flames. You've been documenting everything. Everything I could find. And I found a lot. I pulled out another stack. 17 separate instances where you claimed credit for my work. 5 consulting contracts totaling $38,000 in fees you earned using my expertise. 3 academic conferences where you presented research I conducted. Her face went gray. How did you? Google alerts, professional networks, academic databases. Amazing what you can discover when you start looking for it. I leaned back in my chair. Did you know there's a video of your keynote at the Oregon conference? I watched the whole thing last night. You spent 45 minutes describing my classroom techniques to an audience of teachers, using slides that included photos of my actual students' work. The video had been the most damning evidence I'd found. Jessica, confident and polished on stage, explaining mathematical concepts she clearly didn't understand, describing classroom management strategies she'd never implemented, sharing research findings from studies she'd never conducted. Watching it had been like seeing someone wear my skin. Those teachers trusted you, I continued. They took notes on your presentation. They planned to implement your suggestions with their students. Do you understand the damage you could have caused? These are real kids whose education could have suffered because their teachers were following advice from someone with no actual expertise. Stop it. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. Just stop. Why? Because it's uncomfortable to hear? Because facing the scope of what you've done is painful? I gathered the documents back into neat stacks. I've been uncomfortable for 4 years, Jessica. I've been sitting in family dinners listening to mom and dad praise you for my achievements. I've been watching colleagues cite your fake expertise while my real work went unrecognized. You want to talk about pain? Let's talk about watching someone steal your life's work and turn it into their personal brand. Jessica sank into the chair across from me, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. I never meant to hurt you. What did you think would happen? That I'd never find out? That I'd just quietly keep teaching while you built a fake career on my foundation? I thought. She paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I thought you didn't care about recognition. You never promoted yourself, never bragged about your achievements. I thought it didn't matter to you. So you decided it mattered to you instead. Yes, the admission came out like a confession. Madeline, you have no idea what it's like being your sister. You're brilliant, you're accomplished, you make a difference in people's lives. I push papers around a lab and date my supervisor's friend. When the scholarship opportunity presented itself, it felt like finally having something impressive to claim. I studied her face, looking for genuine remorse but finding only self-pity. You could have earned impressive things on your own. How? I'm not smart like you. I don't have your natural talent or your moral compass or your ability to help people. I'm just ordinary. So you stole extraordinary from someone else. The words hit her like a physical blow. She buried her face in her hands, and for a moment I felt an echo of the old Madeline, the sister who would have rushed to comfort her. But then I remembered the video of her keynote speech, the confidence with which she'd claimed my work, the $38,000 she'd earned using expertise she'd stolen from me. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady. You're going to write letters to every organization you defrauded, confessing to the misrepresentation and offering to return any money you received under false pretenses. You're going to post a correction on all your social media accounts, clearly stating that the educational work attributed to you was actually conducted by me. And you're going to stay out of education consulting permanently. Madeline, I can't. If I confess to fraud, you already committed fraud. I'm offering you the chance to make partial restitution before the legal consequences get worse. I pulled out my phone and showed her the email from Oregon's legal department. They're launching a formal investigation. The Tribune wants to interview me for their retraction article. 3 universities have requested documentation about the misattributed research. This is happening with or without your cooperation. Jessica looked at the phone screen, her face crumpling. You really are going to destroy me? No, I said firmly. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure you don't take me down with you. She sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the evidence spread across my kitchen table. Finally, she looked up at me with something I'd never seen in her eyes before, genuine fear. What about mom and dad? What about the family? What about them? They're going to hate me. They'll never forgive this. I thought about my parents' faces at the country club, the confusion and guilt when they realized they'd been celebrating lies. The years of praising Jessica's borrowed accomplishments while my real achievements went unnoticed. They might, I said. But that's between you and them. I'm done managing your relationships for you. Jessica stood up slowly, like she'd aged a decade in the past hour. Madeline, I know you have every right to be angry, but please, think about what this will do to our family. I've thought about it, I said. And I've decided that protecting the family from the consequences of your choices isn't my job anymore. She walked to the door, then turned back one final time. I really am sorry. For all of it. I believe you're sorry you got caught, I replied. Whether you're sorry you did it is something you'll have to figure out for yourself. After she left, I sat in my quiet apartment, surrounded by evidence of my reclaimed life. Outside my window, the city was waking up, people heading to work, students walking to school, ordinary lives proceeding normally while mine had fundamentally shifted. For the first time in 29 years, I was the sister in control of her own narrative. 3 months later, I stood in front of 200 educators at the National Mathematics Education Conference, delivering the keynote speech that should have been mine from the beginning. When we talk about culturally responsive mathematics instruction, I said, clicking to the next slide, we're not just adapting curriculum. We're acknowledging that every student brings mathematical knowledge from their own cultural context, and our job is to build bridges between their understanding and academic requirements. The audience was engaged, taking notes, nodding at concepts I'd spent 5 years developing. In the front row, Dean Morrison smiled proudly. Dr. Kim from UC Berkeley, who'd tracked me down after Jessica's fraud came to light, had personally recommended me for this speaking opportunity. After my presentation, during the networking session, I was approached by a young Latina teacher from Texas. Miss Chen, your session was incredible. I have 17 English language learners in my algebra class, and I've been struggling to help them see the connections between their intuitive understanding and formal mathematical language. I spent 20 minutes with her, sharing specific techniques, offering to send her lesson plans, connecting her with other educators who'd successfully implemented my methods. This was why I'd become a teacher, these moments when knowledge transferred directly into improved student outcomes. As I walked back to my hotel room that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Watched your speech online. Dad and I are so proud we could barely contain ourselves. You were magnificent. The past 3 months had been a careful rebuilding of family relationships. After Jessica's confession and the subsequent legal fallout, my parents had gone through their own process of reckoning. Mom had called me crying twice, apologizing for years of taking my achievements for granted. Dad had driven to my apartment to personally deliver a framed copy of my Teacher of the Year nomination certificate, the one they'd never properly celebrated. Jessica had moved to Denver after losing her job and settling with Oregon's Department of Education. She'd returned the consulting fees and issued public corrections about her fraudulent claims. Marcus hadn't just broken up with her, he'd also reported the academic misrepresentation to her former employer. The biotech industry, it turned out, took professional integrity seriously. She'd sent me a letter last month, a real, handwritten apology that took responsibility without making excuses or asking for forgiveness. It was probably the most honest communication we'd ever had. I'd read it once, filed it with my other documents, and moved on. Back in my hotel room, I opened my laptop to review emails that had accumulated during the conference. 3 new consulting inquiries, 2 interview requests from education journalists, and an invitation to join the editorial board of a peer-reviewed journal on multicultural mathematics education. At the bottom of my inbox was a message that made me pause. Congratulations from a former colleague. I opened it cautiously, expecting another professional networking attempt. Instead, I found a note from Dr. Peterson, the colleague who'd first congratulated Jessica about my scholarship 4 years ago at that work party, the mistake that had started everything. Madeline, I wanted to reach out after learning about what happened with your sister and your professional identity. I feel terrible knowing that my misidentification at Marcus's party may have contributed to the situation. I've been following your recent speaking engagements and wanted to say how impressed I am with your grace in handling everything. The education field is lucky to have you. I stared at the message, thinking about the chain of events that had led to this moment. If Dr. Peterson hadn't congratulated the wrong sister, if Jessica had corrected the mistake immediately, if I had been more assertive about my achievements from the beginning, everything might have been different. But then I might never have found my voice. I might have continued being the quietly competent sister who let others take center stage while I worked in the shadows. The next morning, I flew back to Sacramento and returned to Lincoln High School, where my students were waiting with their algebra homework and their dreams of college admission. My classroom felt different now, not smaller, as I'd worried it might after speaking to hundreds of colleagues, but more grounded. This was where the real work happened, where abstract mathematical concepts became tools for students to build their futures. Miss Chin called Maria, one of my juniors, as I was setting up for first period. My mom saw your speech online. She wanted me to tell you that she's proud of me for having such a good teacher. Tell your mom I'm proud of you for working so hard, I replied. And remind her that your success comes from your effort, not my teaching. But even as I said it, I felt a quiet pride in my work that I'd never allowed myself to experience fully before. Jessica's theft had forced me to articulate my own value, to document my achievements, to step into the recognition I'd always avoided. During lunch, I walked to my mailbox in the main office and found an envelope addressed in familiar handwriting. Jessica's letter, forwarded from my apartment. I opened it carefully. Madeline, I know I don't deserve a response to my last letter, and I'm not asking for one. I'm writing because my therapist says I need to acknowledge harm I've caused without expecting absolution. I've been in Denver for 3 months now, working as a laboratory technician again, starting over completely. It's humbling, but also honest in a way my life hasn't been for years. I want you to know that I've been following your career, appropriately this time, as someone who genuinely admires your work rather than someone trying to steal it. Your keynote speech was brilliant. Watching it made me understand, maybe for the first time, what I'd actually taken from you. Not just credit for your achievements, but the opportunity to be seen and celebrated for who you really are. I robbed you of 4 years of recognition, but I also robbed myself of 4 years of being a real sister to someone remarkable. That's a loss I'll carry forever. I hope you're building the life you always deserved. I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer. Not forgiveness, exactly, but acknowledgement. The beginning of something that might eventually become a different kind of family relationship, built on truth instead of performance. That afternoon, as my students worked through complex equations, I walked around the classroom offering guidance and encouragement. These kids, recent immigrants, first-generation college hopefuls, students who'd been told they weren't math people, were mastering concepts that would open doors to engineering, computer science, economics, medicine. This was my real legacy. Not the conferences or the publications or the professional recognition, though those had their place. My legacy lived in the moment when Miguel finally understood quadratic functions, when Fatima realized she could major in engineering, when David discovered that mathematics was a language he could speak fluently despite English being his second language. At the end of the day, I updated my classroom blog with photos from the conference and a reflection for my students. Your teacher spoke to educators from around the country about the techniques we use in our classroom. You are the reason these methods work. You are the proof that mathematics belongs to everyone. Walking to my car, I passed the school's trophy case where my Teacher of the Year nomination certificate was now displayed alongside other faculty achievements. Not hidden behind reading glasses or tucked into a drawer, but prominently featured as an example of Lincoln High's educational excellence. I drove home through familiar streets, past the country club where this all began, past the cafe where Jessica had tried to justify her theft, past the apartment complex where I'd lived when the first scholarship letter arrived at the wrong address. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Same face, same brown eyes, same thoughtful expression I'd inherited from Dad. But something fundamental had changed in the past 3 months. The sister who'd been content to remain invisible was gone. In her place was someone who understood her own worth and wasn't afraid to claim it. My phone rang as I pulled into my parking space. Unknown number, which usually meant another professional opportunity. Madeline Chen? This is Dr. Williams from the Department of Education in Washington. We've been following your work in culturally responsive mathematics education, and we'd like to discuss a position developing national curriculum standards. Would you be interested in a conversation? I looked up at my small apartment building, then at the larger world beyond it, classrooms full of students who needed advocates, policies that needed changing, systemic inequities that needed addressing through better education. Yes, I said. I'd be very interested in that conversation. For 29 years, I'd believed that good work spoke for itself, that recognition would come naturally to those who deserved it, that staying in the background was a virtue rather than a choice. Jessica's betrayal had taught me something crucial. The world only celebrates the voices it can hear. Now I was finally ready to be heard. Have you ever discovered that reclaiming what was stolen from you meant finding a voice you never knew you had?